In previous videos, we explained how detrimental it is to hire so many unprepared people for these jobs from the perspective of job seekers. However, we must add that it causes immense frustration and depression for individuals who have graduated with a bachelor's degree in computer science and, despite having extensive experience, deliver impeccable performances in their interviews, are still rejected. This rejection stems from a decision made before they even began the recruitment process, leaving them unable to support their families because boot camps have criminalized the job search process. This desperation can lead to all sorts of extreme and painful outcomes for the families of these unemployed candidates. Likewise, it can cause depression in those who pay for boot camp services and are eventually hired. Upon arriving at their dream jobs, reality confronts them with stressful and incomprehensible situations. They feel diminished, unable to understand what they are supposed to do or how to succeed in such a project, leading to depression. They never consider that the boot camp itself is responsible for all of this, having used their money to allegedly bribe staff at the hiring company. If you believe that anyone has the right to be hired by IT companies with exorbitant salaries, we invite you to hire the services of a boot camp. After a year, you yourself will be accusing those you paid of fraud for a substandard course and answers to all the interview questions, but not a single valid response to the day-to-day realities of working on a computer project. He will accuse them of feeling diminished and ridiculed for convincing himself that he could do something he was never prepared for, and he will accept that number 4-month course can be compared to graduating from a university after completing 4 years of studies focused on computer science. So, what problems do boot camps create for computer companies today? Incredible financial losses, which can amount to billions of dollars in some cases and bankruptcy in others. In this video, we'll see the effect they have on giant corporations. Let's recall Clement Mihailescu and his case, in which he recounts that his first job after graduating with a degree in mathematics was at Company G. Let's also remember Zubin Pratap and his even more serious case, in which the first rule of engineering, never mess with a lawyer, was violated. As we mentioned earlier, he happily graduated as a lawyer, but unable to support his family, he attended a boot camp, which he discusses in this video, but he omits it from his LinkedIn profile, and we know he also hid it from his resume when he joined Company G. Considering the salary for the most junior position, L3, at Company G, which is just over $185,000 annually, and knowing that Company G allows its employees at least a year to adapt, let's assume that the average employee stays longer than that. Knowing that upon signing a contract and completing the year, they receive a bonus of approximately $50,000, then Company G wastes approximately $285,000 each year on salaries and bonuses alone for each employee who doesn't stay beyond the first year. Also, in more than half of the cases, relocation expenses are at least $50,000, and until last month, H-1B visa applications cost another $50,000 per person and nearly $70,000 for the rest of the family. So, if Company G hires 4,000 software engineers per year, and at least 2,400 of them come from a boot camp, we can assume that Company G is throwing away approximately $684 million in bonuses and salaries alone. If 1,200 of these are foreign nationals, then the cost of each employee and their spouse is $120,000, meaning Company G is wasting at least $144 million on visas. In total, this would be $828 million lost annually, and we haven't even included the cost of visas for employees with children. Why do we say this investment is wasted money? Because by the end of the year, most of those hired have already resigned, and none have produced what Company G expected for the position they were hired for. Now, taking the example of what happened during the last month leading up to the publication of this video, the cloud hosting services of Cloudflare and AWS have caused problems in the global economy day after day due to service deficiencies. The reason these malfunctions have occurred in both services is undoubtedly due to the numerous hires of unqualified personnel who paid for a boot camp. If both companies want to refute what we just said, they must publicly disclose the information that all their current employees filled out on their company applications. We would like to see that happen because they would be forced to purge their offices of all personnel who lied on their job applications. Taking the case of BigSmile, a company that hires between 40,000 and 50,000 software engineers a year, the fact that they pay $180 million annually to approximately 40,000 of the bootcamp graduates represents $7.2 billion lost per year. This explains why AWS generates so many errors today. We'd like to know what President Trump would think if he were aware of the losses suffered by IT companies due to hiring unqualified personnel from boot camps. While this problem isn't the responsibility of the federal government, it affects not only the country's economy but also the entry of unqualified individuals into residency programs. Furthermore, it's illegal for these individuals to obtain visas because someone from the boot camp lied on their forms and during the background check conducted by the company's lawyers. Upon arriving in the United States with their families and resigning or being fired within the first year, they become a burden on the American state, a burden on the healthcare system, a burden on the education system, and the fact that they cannot be deported because the visa itself grants them a period of at least 1 year to find a new job. They use the name of the large company to get hired at a smaller company and end up being a bigger problem for the new employer because the company's resources are more limited and they cannot waste money like the giant corporations, which can lead to the small company going bankrupt, while at the same time real American software engineers cannot find work. However, the case of BigSmile is quite unique. The first filter is an online system where recruiters from all the company's offices worldwide request an online assessment for each candidate. But this system isn't controlled by the recruiter as it is in other companies. Instead, it's controlled by the staff at the Vancouver office. This gives a very small group greater control over who advances to the next interview stage. Fewer than 10 people in Vancouver are responsible for ensuring that the mafia's candidates are accepted into the interviews and the rest are rejected by the system itself. Therefore, it only takes possibly bribing a very small group of people to control who moves on to the second phase, not only in the United States but worldwide. Therefore, the total amount of possible bribes is infinitely smaller, and the result is a complete win for the entire mafia of former recruiters from the BigSmile Corporation. What's already been determined is that, regardless of who you are or what position you're applying for, if you don't hire one of these interview coaches who worked at that corporation years ago, you'll never achieve a score higher than 50% on the online assessment practice tests. In fact, before this video publication, always has been the case, without exception, that all candidates in different recruitment processes consistently scored 9 out of 15 practice tests on the first exercise and 6 out of 15 on the second exercise. It's normal to get that result once, but for it to be repeated without exception for all candidates in the same work group is statistically impossible. It's also impossible to get the same result every time you try to pass the online assessment again with different exercises. The fact that a score of 9 out of 15 is repeated in the first exercise and a score of 6 out of 15 in the second is even more statistically impossible. Therefore, there's no doubt that the system is rigged so that candidates who aren't included on the lists that the interview coaches give to BigSmile's internal staff each month fail simply because the exercises assigned to candidates who haven't paid a coach have incorrect values in the database. To understand this better, let's look at the following example. Remember that the exercises we're showing are very simple, while the ones BigSmile asks are much more complex. But let's imagine the Tampa candidate from the previous video applying for a position at BigSmile and being asked to create a function that takes two numbers and returns the sum of their values. The table below shows the test cases on the left, the values our function returns in the center, and the values HackerRank has recorded as correct in its database. As you can see, there are 6 cases in red where the function returns the correct value, but HackerRank has intentionally recorded an incorrect value for 6 of the 15 test cases. In the second example, we have an array, and the function is asked to return the number of elements in the array. You can see that our function always returns the correct value, but HackerRank intentionally expects an incorrect value so that the app automatically reports that our exam results show we got 50% when we need at least 60% to proceed to interviews with BigSmile staff. So, if you pay an interview coach, they provide you with the exercises with all the correct answers and you get 100%. That way, the technical interviews don't have to be bribed because they've already ensured that they only interview those who paid. If you've ever applied to a position at BigSmile, you know we're not lying. All the recruiters give you links to interview coach videos on YouTube at the start of the process. This makes us think the whole thing is orchestrated so that you either pay or you don't get hired at that corporation. Of course, they have to have a quota of at least 5,000 candidates, people who didn't pay, out of the 50,000 they hire annually, to make it believable that someone would pay to be hired without paying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. That way, you also help more software engineers know what's going on these days.